Hello students, welcome to ME 6509, Materials and Sustainability graduate module at the National University of Singapore. This is a module in line with the national, international trends, and I thought it is best for you to learn and hear from practicing professionals. Today, it is with a great pleasure, honor, and happiness, I invite Ms. Catherine Loke, a passionate individual about sustainability. Through her lecture, she would engage you, her thoughts, ideas, and foresight related to materials and sustainability. With this short introduction, it is my pleasure to invite Ms. Catherine Loke to take over from me. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Seeram. I'm very honored to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so today, rather than tell you about materials and sustainability, I thought I would go through a certain thought process. And then by the end of the lecture, you'll probably have more questions than answers. But that's the whole idea, because it is in asking the right questions that we will get to the right answers. So the title of this talk is How to Make a Pencil. And just a little bit about myself. I'm actually an architect. I'm not a material scientist or an engineer. And I've been practicing in Singapore since 1993. I'm also adjunct associate professor at NUS, teaching at the Department of Architecture. I use building information modeling a lot in my practice. And I also regularly speak about BIM practice and building contracts matters. But what I'm really passionate about really is about the economics of sustainability and what motivates human behavior. Because a lot of, it's not that we don't know about climate change. It's not that we don't know about pollution and things like that. We know all these things, and we've known for many, many years, but why do we keep on doing what we're doing? So the key to that answer is actually to understand what actually motivates us and what are the systemic things that need to change in order for us to be able to change. I'm also the founding president of a new society called the Circle for Human Sustainability. I formed this society together with a few like-minded people because we felt that if we kept within our own disciplines and talked only amongst ourselves, we won't get very far because we cannot have a holistic view of the issues. So this society is a transdisciplinary one. It will comprise scientists, sociologists, economists, and built environment professionals, because we want to look at things holistically and work towards a balanced economic system that is not reliant on growth and enables ecologically responsible behavior. If you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, there's a link at the bottom, or you can look for me on LinkedIn, and then we can connect and continue to have further conversations. So how is a pencil made? When I was preparing for this, I was thinking, if I took something like a mobile phone or an appliance, it's something very, very complex and probably quite difficult to understand how it's made. So I thought I look at something very simple. And at that time, I happened to be holding a pencil. So I thought, okay, I'll find out how a pencil is made. And I thought this should be easy. But then I discovered or learned a lot of things about what a pencil is made of. So the thing is that because of industrialization, a lot of the processes have been split. And all of us are great at consuming stuff, but very, very few of us are actually involved in the production of the things that we consume. So we have actually very little understanding of how things are made. We don't know where raw materials come from. And we definitely don't understand the amount of energy it needs to actually mine and process and manufacture everyday items that we just take for granted. This is a video of how pencils are made. You can watch it on YouTube. There's a hyperlink here. The slides that you will receive, just click and you can go and watch. But for now, I won't play the video. I will just show you some stills of the key steps it takes to make a pencil. Cedar wood is used, and it arrives in the factory in these small slats. And then it's passed through a machine that cuts grooves in these slats. So these grooves are to hold the lead. Then after that, another machine fills the grooves with PVA glue. And then every second slat moves to another conveyor belt. So I will tell you in a few seconds what this second slat is going to do. Then this is the lead that's going to go in the pencils. They are made from a mixture of graphite and clay, and then baked so that they harden. And then a machine places them in the slats that had the grooves cut in them. And then if you remember, every second slat was moved to another conveyor belt. So those slats are then flipped over and then pressed on top of the slat that has the leads in them. So it forms like a sandwich like that. Then after that, the sandwiches go through a press for about an hour so that the glue can dry and set. Then after that, another machine slices the sandwiches. So it forms the hexagonal shape. The three sides of the hexagonal shape at the top, right? That's the first run. So it would be like this if you stop the process there. And then after that, the same shape is cut at the bottom. So once the bottom side is cut, then you get these individual pencils. And these are then passed through another machine that applies paint on them. And then the last step is to put the rubber tip. So the machine squeezes an aluminum ferrule at the top of the pencil and then pushes the eraser in and squeezes the ferrule tight so that it holds the eraser in place. And then the last step is to pass the pencils through a grinding drum, and that's how they get sharpened. So there you go, that's how you make a pencil. And you'll notice that throughout this process, you hardly saw any human, right? Apart from the first bit where there was a person holding one of the slats. But other than that, you didn't see any humans there, did you? Okay, so that seems quite simple. We can deconstruct a pencil, look at what it's made of. The core, of course, is the lead, and it's surrounded by cedar, as you have seen. And then there's a paint or lacquer applied on it. And then if you have an eraser at the end, you put an aluminum ferrule to hold the eraser at the end. So that looks pretty simple, right? So let's look at the raw materials then. So the raw material is actually cedar. 14-year-old trees are the best, apparently. And they have the right hardness, not to break when you hold it, but the right softness so that you can sharpen it. And apart from felling from forests, there are cedar plantations. So far so good, that seems to be quite all right. Then the next one is graphite. Graphite is one of the three natural forms of pure carbon. So the other two we know quite well as well, coal and diamond. But graphite has to be mined, we can't grow it. So this is what a graphite mine looks like. So that's not looking so good now, right? But actually we can make synthetic graphite. In fact, in the making of pencils nowadays, they tend to use more synthetic graphite than mined graphite. But to make graphite synthetically, we need to heat coke up to 2000 degrees centigrade, then crush it into a powder, and then mix it with silicon and heat it again to form silicon carbide. And then we heat it again to more than 4000 degrees centigrade to form graphite. So that's again not sounding so good, because if you look at the energy involved, then it's very, very energy intensive process. But there is a company called Carbonscape. There is a link here. When you get your notes, you can click on the link to see there is this company that says it can make graphite from biomass and recycled tires. I don't know what the process involved, is the process involved or how much energy it takes to actually make this graphite, but you can have a look at it yourself. Then the other two minerals that go into the clay of the pencil lead is calcium bentonite and kaolin. And if you look at the mines, they look pretty much like the graphite mines. It's just this huge open scar on the earth with all the topsoil gone and no plants and no sign of life anywhere. So we've seen the four main raw materials, the trees, graphite, calcium bentonite, and kaolin. So the trees undergo sawing, then after that drying, staining, waxing, and cutting to form the slats that you saw in the video just now. So the amount of fuel, normally when you fell trees, you will use a chainsaw, and then that's powered fossil fuels. Then you need to transport it to the factory. So the truck will probably be using diesel. And then at the factory, you need electricity to do the processing. So for mining, and then after that, there's continued cutting and sanding to form the slats with the grooves that you also saw in the video. And for mining, you need to actually go through beneficiation, which is actually the removal of the impurities. Then after that, you have to grind all these minerals into a powder. And kaolin also has to go through a process of bleaching. And then you need to add water, and water is not just water. In industrial processes, water has to be clean, so the water needs to be treated. Then after that, you mix it all together, and then you extrude it into rods. Then the rods need to be cut and heated to form leads. And then the leads need to go in a wax bath. And then as you saw in the video, there was glue applied to the slats with grooves. This is actually PVA glue, which is a petroleum product. So I actually haven't gone into research into the process of making PVA glue. You can have a look at that yourself as well. But I think I didn't have enough space in this slide to put another process map on top of this process map. So when you combine these together, sandwich them together, then after that, apply pressure, and then you have to cut it into the individual pencils. Then after that, it goes through the painting process. So the paint that's typically used is lacquer, which is a petroleum product right now, although we can make natural lacquer, but the lacquer that we are using now is a petroleum product. And then after that, you want to attach the eraser, you have the aluminum ferrule, which is made from bauxite, which is mined. So I'm not going to show you a picture of a bauxite mine, but it will look pretty much like a graphite or calcium bentonite or kaolin mine. So with the mining, there's also the processing before it and stamping before it's made into the ferrule. So all of this involves transportation and a lot of energy and heat as well. And finally, the eraser. That's another process also, which I have not added to this process map. Erasers are made from synthetic rubber and sulfur and vulcanized vegetable oil added and calcium carbonate added. So again, more energy, more mining, more heat. Then finally, we have pencil, but that doesn't reach the consumer yet. You need your packaging. So pencils often come in cardboard boxes, and that is a paper product. So that's another process there, which I haven't drawn, which will include farming trees or felling trees, then processing it into wood pulp, adding a lot of water, and then also printing the manufacturer's information onto the cardboard packaging itself. And the ink also contains petroleum products. And after all that, finally, it will be transported to the consumer. So if you add up all the energy involved, I think you will look at your pencils quite differently now. So what is solar energy? Since we're talking about so much energy in making a pencil, then what about solar energy? We hear a lot about solar energy nowadays. What actually is it? So is this it? This is what we normally hear, right? The sunshine is everywhere, so we can put up solar panels and we can get all this energy for free. Well, actually, solar energy actually is in plants, because plants learn to use photosynthesis to convert the solar energy into sugars in the plant itself. So actually, the plant is a solar cell. So plants actually capture solar energy, then animals eat plants, and then we eat plants and the animals that eat plants. So actually, when you are eating your nasi lemak, you are actually putting solar energy into your belly. And then that will be used by your muscles when you do work. So in agrarian societies, actually the energy source was our own muscle power and that of the animals we used. So because humans are actually, in the animal kingdom, we don't really have very much muscle power. So in the past, we used a lot of beasts of burden. In fact, not so long ago, horses were still being used for transport. Only about 100 years ago, or even less than 100 years ago for some societies. And in some places in the world today, people are still using elephants and buffaloes to pull heavy equipment when they're doing their farming. So we are actually still using animals, and we are still using some of our muscle power. But generally in agrarian societies, a lot of the work was done by, about 90% of the work were done by farmers, servants, and slaves, because most of the time was spent growing food, because that was the way we could capture solar energy. Then there were 10% of the people who actually could do other things, because through agriculture, we had a food surplus. So other professions evolved. Then, of course, if you're the pharaoh, you're at the top of the pile, and everybody does all the work, and you reap the benefits of it. So what are fossil fuels? Well, fossil means something that's been dead hundreds of millions of years ago. And fuel, because we are using it, we're using the power, we're using the energy in the bellies of those animals and in the plants that lived hundreds of millions of years ago to power our work today. So there are actually three types of fossil fuels: coal, oil, and natural gas. And the process of them forming is that when they died, they sank to the bottom of the ocean. And then through years and years and years of sedimentation and pressure, after hundreds of millions of years, we have trapped oil and trapped gas that we have managed to mine. So actually, the plants, this is like the nasi lemak after it's gone, 400 million years of pressure from sedimentation on top of it, right? So actually, because of this, you can appreciate, I think, that over 400 million years, how many plants and animals, the remains of how many plants and animals have been converted to fossil fuel. And that's why on Earth, actually, there's no other source of such dense solar energy. So if you go to our World in Data, this is actually a very good website to find a lot of information. And if you just check on energy consumption, you can see from the 1800s, actually, biomass like burning timber and plant cuttings and things like that was what was the predominant source of energy in the 1800s. And then it hasn't changed very much, actually. even until 2019, the amount of biomass that we rely on for energy is not very much. But then you can see from 1850s onwards, the use of coal increased. And then from the 1900s, the use of oil and natural gas, then nuclear power, and other modern biofuels, hydropower. And then we have renewables, actually just a tiny bit, which is fairly recent. So actually, today, biomass forms about 6% of our energy source. So if all of these were to go away, we will only have 6% of the energy available to us. So can you imagine what your lifestyle will be if we took away 94% of your energy source now? I actually couldn't even be doing this talk because I couldn't be running my computer. So this is what it looks like in Singapore. In Singapore, we mainly use natural gas, but it is a fossil fuel still. And then we do use some renewables, and we do have some biomass incineration. And of course, we incinerate our rubbish. And that takes up only 3.2% of our energy source. So in Singapore, if we took away fossil fuels, we have only 3% of the energy to run our lifestyles today. Every year, in fact, the world burns 400 times in fossil fuels. Fossil fuels equal to 400 times the Earth's total annual plant growth. So let's say we did nothing but try to grow biomass to fuel ourselves, our current lifestyles. If we weren't trying to grow food or anything, we only grew biomass. And actually this is all plant growth, right? And it's all our forests, everything. We would actually need 400 Earths to power our current lifestyle. And then we haven't even grown any food. So in 1963, or actually in 1940, Buckminster Fuller first used the term energy slave, but in 1963, he wrote about it again, and he actually calculated or estimated, he created this unit of energy called energy slave, which he says is an inanimate energy source capable of producing the same amount of work as a man, 150,000 foot-pounds per 8-hour day, 250 days per year. So he assumes that you're not working on weekends and some public holidays. So 250 work days per year. That is his unit of energy slave. So in 2009, actually, there was an experiment conducted in England on a British family who were living in a 4-bedroom house. So the scientists rigged up their power supply to the house next door and connected it to 100 bicycles. And they got an army of volunteers to furiously pedal 100 bicycles to generate the energy to support the lifestyles of the people who are living in this house. So apparently it took 11 cyclists to make 2 slices of toast. So tomorrow when you have your breakfast, just think about how many energy slaves you actually have on hand in order for you to have your breakfast. Then at the end of the experiment, many of the cyclists collapsed and several couldn't walk for days. And actually, the peddlers consume more food, more energy in the food than they generated by peddling. So if we really wanted to employ people to just peddle away for us, we couldn't actually feed them enough to provide surplus energy for us to actually make our 2 slices of toast. So tomorrow when you operate your washing machine, just think how many energy slaves you have actually washing your clothes for you. Also, David Hughes, who is the former coal specialist in Canada, estimates it might take one person 8.6 years on a bicycle to produce the energy now stored in 1 barrel of oil. So it allowing for weekends and holidays off and an 8-hour work day. So that's how much energy is in 1 barrel of oil. And the world actually consumes 97 million barrels of oil per day. So can you imagine the amount of energy that we are actually consuming? So for more, if you want more information, this is actually a very, very good book to read. Life After Fossil Fuels by Alice Friedman. It contains a lot of very important information, and it's written in a very readable style. And all the sources are credited, so you can actually go and do more research yourself. And she says that fossil fuels are actually used to make 500,000 products. So if we stop fossil fuels, if we stop the use of fossil fuels today, our lives are going to be very, very different. In fact, most of the things that we use on a daily basis will no longer be available. And when the oil age began, the energy return on investment was 100 to 1, meaning that it took the energy of 1 barrel of oil to get 100 barrels of oil. So in fact, in some cases, oil was just gushing out of the ground. So it's very easy for us to just take it. Today, the global EROI is 17 to 1. So you can see the difference over 100 years, how it is much more difficult today to extract oil from the ground. Some scientists estimate when the EROI drops below 10 to 1, it will no longer be viable. So actually, the reality is that we are not necessarily going to run out of fossil fuels in terms of it being in the ground. There's probably still a lot in the ground, but the thing is that it will become less commercially viable for us to actually extract it. And at that point in time, actually, people will stop mining for fossil fuels. So even when the fossil fuels are still there. So that day actually can come quite soon. It's not long more, I think. So, you know, when you think about that, then what about renewables? Isn't that good news, right? I mean, if we don't have fossil fuels anymore, then we can always switch to renewables. But remember what we saw when we looked at how a pencil is made and the amount of energy that actually goes into making a pencil. Mining actually consumes 10% of the world's energy. So wind, solar, and all other electrical generating machines rely on fossil fuels, as we have seen when we looked at the pencil. And sunshine, actually, we can say that there's sunshine everywhere, but actually, the solar panels themselves do not last forever. If we want to recycle the solar panels, we actually need to disassemble them, etch them, and then we have to melt the panels to remove the lead, cadmium, copper, gallium, indium, aluminium, glass, and silicon. So there is actually a very, very energy intensive process if we wanted to reuse the solar panels. In the first place, there was already a very energy intensive process to mine and manufacture all the parts that go into a solar panel. You've seen already just one pencil required so many different industries and materials to get involved. What more a solar panel? Then how about wind turbines? Well, wind turbines are actually not fully recyclable either. The blades are made of resin and fiberglass, and it's not economical to recycle them. And the base is actually made from reinforced concrete because you have to weigh down the wind turbines, otherwise they will fly away. So the concrete is not really reusable. You can break it up and use it for aggregate or something, but suddenly you cannot make another wind turbine or use it as the base for another wind turbine. So if we really, really wanted to mine all the materials needed to make all the solar panels and wind turbines to produce the energy equivalent to the fossil fuels that we have today, we actually would have to mine 50 million square kilometers of Earth's land, which is 1/3 of Earth's land, in order to be able to extract enough materials to make all these things. But actually, that's not to say we can even reach the materials, because actually the concentration is becoming lower and lower, because we have actually mined things that are easy to reach already. And that's why when we looked at pictures of the graphite mine and the kaolin mine just now, you could see that we have to actually deeply scar the earth. We have to dig up a lot of things that are not what we want in order to get the things that we want. So if we really did that, we would have no more forests, no more animals apart from ourselves and the animals we eat, and we would be doing permanent damage to the ecosystem. So actually, solar panels and wind turbines might be rebuildable. Actually, even then I'm a bit skeptical, but they are definitely not renewable when you look at things holistically. So if you look at what's happened, and if you apply common sense, then you might think, why do we consume so much? I mean, nobody wants to damage the earth, and we know we're damaging the earth. Why are we still doing it? Why are we consuming so much? So to go back about 300 years, you may have heard of Adam Smith, who is known as the father of modern economics. So actually, Smith was a professor of philosophy at Glasgow College, and during Smith's day, actually, there was no discipline of economics. There was nothing called economics, you know, as a separate subject that you could study at the university. It was actually a branch of moral philosophy. So what they were studying actually is human behavior, what makes us tick, and what is morality and ethics. And Smith also lived in the age of the Enlightenment, which was when scientific discoveries were starting to have a major effect on people's lives. And people were starting to look at how to understand natural laws. So the beginnings of economics was actually an endeavor to understand natural human behavior. So in 1776, Smith published this book, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. And he observed, this is a very famous quote from Smith's book, it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages. Nobody but a beggar chooses to depend chiefly upon the benevolence of his fellow citizens. So what he's saying is that when you go and buy something from a butcher or a baker, they are actually looking after themselves. They are not baking bread because they want to feed you, but it's more for their self-interest. But he says that in the pursuit of self-interest, an individual is led by an invisible hand, meaning that there is no governing body or any person telling people to behave that way. They are just behaving that way naturally, and that by pursuing his own self-interest, he frequently promotes that of the society more effectually than when he really intends to promote it. So this was his observation, that society can benefit, and in some ways that is true. I mean, if you look at the products that we have available to us today, a lot of innovation has come about because of competition between different suppliers. So we see prices dropping while the quality of things have improved. So this is an observation. This is not the only observation Smith made. I will talk about other observations he made later. But this is one of the most famous ideas that he wrote down, which has influenced the way economics evolved to what it is today. So some economists and governments believe that things should be left to the invisible hand, and government should not regulate too much or not try to control things too much, right? But Smith never actually said that this was the only way an economy would run. So the free market economy is essentially driven by self-interest and consumerism. When we see the word consumerism, it might have, today might have sort of negative connotations, right? Like we'll sort of think that, oh, people are materialistic or things like that. But before we pass judgment, we should understand how this came about. So actually, the use of fossil fuels, as you've seen, because it is so energy rich, it actually enabled an increase in productivity. And as a result of that, it made consumer goods very cheap, because it was very cheap for the manufacturer to produce so many things at such variety and such quantity that the prices could come down. And because of price signals, we consume more and more. Generally, when we're given the choice, we will pay for something that's cheaper or more convenient. That is a fact. And you just observe yourself in your day-to-day life, what kind of choices you make when you go and buy something. And because of this, us consuming more and more, our economies grew and grew and grew. Admittedly, economic growth has brought great improvements in the quality of life. There's no doubt about that. But now it's not necessarily the case anymore in affluent countries. So if we just keep on growing our economies more and more, it doesn't necessarily make us have better lives. And in fact, if you talk to anyone, I think most of us know it intuitively as well, right? Beyond a certain point, more money doesn't make you happier. We all know this, but yet we continue with this economic growth model. The other thing to understand is that the system ignores environmental costs. So we are not actually paying for the hundreds of millions of years to form fossil fuels. We just get it straight out of the ground. Whereas, like, if we wanted to make a solar panel, let's say, we have to actually pay for the making of the solar panel in order to get the electricity and then be able to use it. Whereas for the fossil fuels, we just took it out, and you can actually burn it straight away and use the energy that way. And we also don't pay for the environmental damage caused by our activities. And in fact, economists call these externalities, because it's external to the system. So it's like, yep, we don't need to think about that because it's an externality. So to understand this better, we can have a look at this diagram, which is from Tim Jackson's Prosperity Without Growth, which is a book that he wrote in 2009. This was the first edition, but a few years ago, he actually published a second edition. So this represents the engine for growth. So actually, our consumption is fueled by, it's a debt-driven economy. So basically, we have a lot of credit, right? So we can actually spend money we don't have. And when we spend money, it oils this wheel and keeps it turning. So the companies continue to produce more and more products for households to consume. And then we continue to get more and more credit. And this sort of spins into more and more productivity. And we basically are passing on the debt actually to future generations. But we're no longer able to pay, the economy will collapse. So why wouldn't we be able to pay? I mean, so far, everything is fine, right? You invest and then, you get some return on investment, and you can then pay back the bank. Then the bank pays, you have a bank account, you also get interest from the bank. So everything is going round and round. So why would it stop, right? Well, the reason it could stop is because we are actually not factoring in energy, and we are not factoring in the natural resources, the real cost to actually extract these. So we keep this going. It's like a game of musical chairs, because if we stop the music, someone's going to be without a chair. And the longer we play this game of pursuing GDP growth, the more people will be without a chair when the music stops. But right now, nobody wants to stop the music because nobody wants to be the one who is without the chair. So this is why we are still pursuing GDP growth. This is why our economy is still driven by consumption. Okay, so just now I mentioned that Adam Smith didn't only talk about self-interest. What else did he talk about? Well, he also looked at another aspect of human nature. The first one being, with the greater part of rich people, the chief enjoyment of riches consists in the parade of riches. Okay, so I don't mean to sort of attack rich people. In fact, I think that people in other countries would consider Singapore a rich country and would consider us to be rich people, and that we are also actually enjoying parading our riches, right? So this is not meant to be a negative comment. This is just one of the observations that he made as to what makes us tick, right? What is in our psyche. And the other one, quite similar, is that he used the linen shirt as an example. So he says a linen shirt is, strictly speaking, not necessary for life, right? But why do you buy it, right? So in Europe, a linen shirt was a symbol that you actually can afford to buy a linen shirt. And you wouldn't be able to afford to buy a linen shirt only if you were somehow in some disgraceful degree of poverty. And you could only be in a disgraceful degree of poverty if you fell into some extreme bad conduct. So owning a linen shirt and going out with a linen shirt showed everyone else that you were a decent person. So in fact, all of us also have this psychologically. We buy some things so that we can appear to be acceptable to society, right? So that's another reason why we consume. If everyone is consuming something, and that's why, you know, in fashion, people follow trends. And sometimes we want to get the latest iPhone, not because we really need to, but we just like to show that we have the latest iPhone and things like that. So we need to understand this is part of our psyche so that we can then take steps to address it. So in order to address it, we need to understand human values. So this is research done by Shalom Schwartz. And there is a link here as well, which you can click and go and read what he wrote. But he conducted, over a period of a few decades, actually, he conducted a study on several cultures, different religions, different nationalities, different backgrounds, and found that there were these traits that were common to all. So from this, he formulated his theory of basic human values. So on the left side are things that we do where we like new things, we like excitement, and we strive for achievement, and we want power, and it's about self-enhancement and, you know, like go, innovation and all these things, right? But then on the right side, there is also traits of self-transcendence and conservation. So there's certain things that we do which we are not like pushing for a lot of change. You know, we also do things for that don't necessarily benefit ourselves individually. So that's self-transcendence, in that you're looking after someone else rather than yourself, and you might feel that you want to conserve something rather than keep on going for something new all the time. So actually, the free market economy, you know, this consumerism actually reflects human activity on this side of the diagram. And what is missing from our current economic system actually is activities from this side of the diagram. So activities like, for example, women who decide to take a break from their careers to look after their children are not paid, right? Because there's no monetary value attached to doing something that is self-transcendental. If you help your neighbor do something, you don't ask for money, you just do it because it makes you feel good. So we actually do a lot of things which is actually good for society, but there is no monetary value attached to it. So in the free market economy, actually, we talk about incentives and price signals. There is actually very, very little incentive for us to do things to help others. But yet, a lot of us actually do that. We quite often hear people leaving high-paying jobs and things like that, and then doing something more meaningful because they just don't feel that, earning a lot of money has given them much satisfaction. So actually, it is not only people acting in self-interest that promotes the interests of society. People acting for others, for the sake of others, also promotes the interests of society. So actually, all of these traits of humanity actually promote the interests of society in some way. So that's why it's not, it doesn't really help us to demonize any particular group of people. It doesn't help us to demonize the rich, let's say, to say that, oh, they are greedy, that's why they became rich. Actually, they became rich because of the way that the system is structured, that rewarded certain traits. That's all it is, not that they are greedy. Because if we get into that kind of conversation, then we will end up actually getting violent over it. We'll have another French Revolution or something like that, right? So actually, it's more important to understand human behavior and then devise a system that will harness these traits. So this is something which I was thinking about over the last couple of years, and something which I published in an article on LinkedIn. There is a link here which you can click and go and read the article. But because looking at Shalom Schwartz's proposition on his theory about basic human values, if we understood basic human values, then our economic system should actually acknowledge both sides of the basic human values diagram, right? So we have this conventional economy, which values the left side of Shalom Schwartz's diagram. And then what I think we could have also is we could have a social economy, which acts like a counterbalance. So it's a bit like the Taoist concept of yin and yang. The left side is the yang and the right side is the yin. And the social economy could be activities that are motivated by self-transcendence and also socially positive occupations. So right now we have occupations that are considered to be low wage, like cleaners. When COVID-19 happened, we realized how important they actually are to us. So rather than treating it as a low wage work, it could actually become like a social occupation where we are paid in credits to do it instead of being paid in money, and where people are rostered to do it in something similar to national service. And then we also need to impose limits. Right now, if we don't impose limits on our consumption, we will not naturally slow down or stop our consumption. So this actually needs to be regulated. And the best model I can think of for Singapore actually is the COE model, because we are already familiar with it. And we can see how it has helped us to limit the ownership of cars. So we can actually apply COEs to other limited resources as well. For example, air conditioning, if we wanted to introduce a COE on that, then suddenly you'll find that everyone will be very motivated to use their air conditioning as little as possible and design buildings that don't require air conditioning. And then the government can manage the revenue as it does the COE. And it can channel some of the revenue towards the management of the social economy. So if we had like a national service type economy where at certain times you might have to go and do some of the socially positive occupations, then some of these income from the COEs can go towards funding that. And the other thing that it could fund is basic necessities. So basic necessities could be things which you can buy using money in the conventional economy, as well as using your social credits. So for example, if we had another disruption similar to COVID-19, where you lost your job, then maybe you might decide that you want to do more of the socially positive occupations, or maybe society will need more of that. We might need, during that period of time of crisis, we needed more nurses, we needed more cleaners, we needed more people to do all the things to ensure that our city can function. So that, people who have lost their jobs could actually temporarily be channeled towards the social economy, and they could use the credits to buy basic necessities, which means that no one is going to starve. And also this system can be quite flexible, because each person can choose how much of the conventional economy to participate in and how much of the social economy to participate in. So depending on your circumstance in life, you can decide either way. And as you get older, maybe you have sufficient savings to buy luxuries, and maybe you prefer to spend more of your time in the social occupations. That could be the case. So if you were able to exchange that for credits for basic necessities, then it means that part of your retirement expenses are taken care of as well. So it also means that when you're younger and participating more in conventional economy, you also don't need to worry so much about having to save for retirement, because as long as you're able-bodied, when you retire, you can still participate in the social economy. So you could actually shift yourself, the balance. You can participate in both, in whatever ratio you like to suit your personal circumstance. And another added bonus, which was not in my article, is that we can actually use the money from the COEs actually to also channel towards rehabilitating damaged environments. And by damaged environments, I mean not only the ones in Singapore, but we can also look beyond Singapore, because there are a lot of minerals that have been extracted for our consumption, and a lot of farms which have cleared forests to feed our appetite for beef or whatever. So in fact, as responsible global citizens, we should actually be channeling some money towards rehabilitating environments that we have participated in damaging as well. So anyway, this is an idea, it's a concept, and I'm happy to have conversations with anyone who wants to develop this further. So a balanced economic system actually will enable us to transition gradually in a controlled manner. Because if we don't do that, then nature is going to pull the brakes on us. Actually, that is inevitable. Fossil fuels won't last forever. So, sooner or later, nature is going to pull the brakes on us. So if we don't start imposing limits on ourselves and transitioning gradually now to a low consumption and low energy economy, then the longer we leave it, the more social strife there will be. During COVID-19 already, you've seen that people fought over toilet paper. And this was, we can laugh about it because, it's like, people fighting over toilet paper. But when more resources become scarce, then people are going to fight over more things than just toilet paper. So I've talked about a balanced economy, but I'm sure you've also heard of the circular economy. I think other speakers have spoken about circular economy. So what about the circular economy? So before we talk about circularity, we must first understand what can or cannot be recycled, right? So is steel recyclable? You would think so, right? You think that, well, it's a metal, you can just melt it and then make it into whatever form you want again, and then use it again. So we can go on and on forever, right? Very good, recyclable. Well, basically, there are actually 4 types of steel. We have carbon steels, alloy steels, stainless steels, and tool steels. So carbon steels are like the mild steel that we see in structures, and they have varying degrees of carbon in them, and that affects their strength. And then we have alloy steels as well, which are iron mixed with a whole heap of other minerals and metals like aluminium, copper, manganese, molybdenum, cobalt, silicon, vanadium, and more and more and more. I just didn't have space to put there. Then we can also have stainless steels, which contain chromium. Some of them actually contain molybdenum as well. So you have all these 4 types of stainless steels. Then we also have tool steels. So these are steels that are specifically made for to withstand the kinds of stresses that a tool would have to withstand, right? So if you have a knife, then it has to be able to be sharpened. It has to be hard enough to cut. And then we have tools that need to resist heat. We have tools like hammers that need to resist high impact, or drills that have to resist high speed, and all kinds of things. So you can see that there are many, many types of steels. So if you want to recycle steel, how do you actually do it? Can you actually melt it all again and then extract all the different minerals and metals that are in it? And then for carbon steels, of course, they are not as rust resistant. So you would actually spend quite a lot of energy or effort to remove the rust. And then steel is often welded together. So sometimes they use the same metal to weld it. Sometimes they use a different metal to weld the steel. So when you recover that steel, do you know what types of metals have been used actually in the welding process as well? And if you could actually melt all of this down and extract all these metals and separate them again, can you remake the steel to the same quality that the original piece of steel had when it was first manufactured? And if you could do all of this, then how much energy is actually involved in dismantling, transporting, and processing? So to explain well, you can think for yourself, right? When you try to answer all those questions, we can't unbake a cake. So there are many, many materials and many industrial processes that are not reversible. There are many things that we use today that cannot be recycled or repurposed or reused. And even if you could, it would require a lot of energy. And in the future, as we have seen, we will not have as much energy as we have today. We actually will have mainly just the biomass, and just about nothing else actually, because nothing else really is renewable. So we often hear this, right? This has been around for long before the term circular economy was used. We often hear that we should reduce, reuse, and recycle. So lately, what I hear a lot is recycle. You know, we are in this kind of, now we're in this recycling frenzy. Let's recycle everything. So the conversation is about recycling. And then not so much about reusing. We still like to throw away stuff. And I hardly hear anything about reducing. Nothing at all. You watch the news, read the newspaper, nobody talks about reducing anything. Everyone's talking about recycling. But actually, if you look at the energy crisis that is going to come sooner than we think, actually, the priority actually should be reduce. Our conversation should be more on reduce as much as we can, then reuse whatever we can reuse, and then as a last resort, recycle. So actually the priority should be on reducing. And that's why I've spent so much time talking about the economic system. So actually, we cannot just look at current consumer items and how to replace them with sustainable alternatives. So this is the observation or problem I have with the conversation on circular economy right now, because we are not looking at, or not looking enough at changing our lifestyles, but we are looking at, oh, how can we swap this for that, or swap this for that? And then it is lulling us into this false sense that, okay, if we can have a circular economy, then everything is going to be fine. Actually, at our current rate of consumption, nothing is sustainable right now. If we do not reduce our rate of consumption, it doesn't matter what we do, nothing is sustainable. So when you want to consider what can or cannot be recycled, we actually have to understand the process holistically, right? Because energy actually is involved in every step of the way. As we have seen with the pencil, you have to look at everything holistically. We cannot be working in our different separate professions and then try and come up with solutions within separate industries. Because if we solve the problem within one, we create another problem in another industry. And if you look at how we are manufacturing today and our mode of transport and the amount of global trade, actually a circular economy can't work because it takes too much energy to extract and transport materials back to the manufacturers in other countries. Singapore is a classic example. We import everything. And if we want to make it circular here, it means we have to manufacture here as well. But that's not quite possible for us also, because we don't have the skill, we don't have the energy. And then if we are doing this without thinking about reducing our consumption, it's just not possible. We don't have energy to extract and take apart all the things that we've imported and then send it back to the people who have the ability or the facility to manufacture it and send it back to us. We don't have the money and we don't have the energy. So actually, when the energy crisis hits, actually globalization will have to scale back. So if we want to do it gradually, we actually should start now to start building up local manufacturing capability, at least for some of the daily essentials, and not rely so much on importing. And then we might have a chance of recycling certain things and maybe reusing certain containers or packaging. But if we don't have localized manufacturing, then it's just not possible. You know, so many times I've thrown away bottles, single use, because, you know, like I like to cook with spices. So, and the spices come in these little bottles. And when I'm finished with it, I can't buy a refill. I have to buy another bottle. Then what do I do with this little bottle? So I end up feeling guilty, and then I keep a whole heap of bottles until I have no space to keep anymore, and then I have to throw it away. So, you know, however responsible I want to be, the system is not allowing me to actually be responsible. In the next 10 to 20 years, actually, what is the most important thing is that when we design or manufacture anything, we must take into account what will happen when fossil fuels are no longer available. So if we really want to talk about circularity, that means the manufacturing process, if we manufacture something today and we intend to be able to take it apart in 10 or 20 years' time, then we must imagine how it can be taken apart without all these high energy processes. It cannot require high heat. It cannot require transportation at long distances. Otherwise, we're just going to have, like this picture here, a rusty tractor just sitting in the middle of the field, totally useless because no one can do anything with it. So in summary, we started off by looking at how a pencil is made. And as we have seen, actually every single step of the way involves fossil fuel energy. So the reality is that our economy is so bound to fossil fuel energy that it's very difficult to not do anything that doesn't involve fossil fuel energy. And with good reason as well, because fossil fuels are the densest store of solar energy ever made by the Earth. And the Earth took 400 million years to do it. So if you just do your math or use some common sense, think about it. Can we ever produce a solar cell or a wind turbine or anything that will come anywhere near producing this kind of energy? It's just not the reality. We don't have the resources, we don't have, we cannot mine, we don't have 400 Earths to grow 400 Earths worth of biomass for us to burn. And that's not even considering food. We cannot be mining all of the Earth for minerals. You know, it's just not possible. We really have to scale back. So we have to face the fact that the energy bonanza is over. Actually, that is the most important thing that we have to face today, that the energy bonanza is over. And the most significant thing we can do and must do now is reduce our consumption, right? We can talk about circularity, renewables, and anything else, fine, we can. But that to me is like the 80-20 rule, you know, the Pareto principle, where 20% of the effort can reap 80% of the result, or the other way around, right? You can expend 80% of energy and reap 20% of the result. To me, I find that the conversations on sustainability today are actually, I would say, even 90-10 rather than 80-20. I would say that 90% of our time is spent looking at things that can only make a difference to 10% of our lives. So we really, the biggest thing that we can do is reduce our consumption. And this 10% of this can actually result in 90% of the difference. This would be the 90-10 of how we need to look at sustainability. So I don't want it to sound depressing. Actually, there's a lot we can do. And actually, there's nothing wrong with a low energy lifestyle. So what you can actually do is educate yourself on the science behind the facts. So just don't take for granted what is told to you. Search out the information. There's a lot of information available. There are a lot of scientific publications, and do the math yourself. Some of the math is actually quite simple. I've already shown you a few of it. You can do the math yourself and think whether something is plausible. And what's important is actually we all actually need to think holistically. So think beyond your profession, discipline, or training. Because the answer cannot come within one industry or one discipline itself. And then adjust your simpler lifestyle. Start now. Use less stuff, use less aircon, less international travel. Unfortunately, I know after COVID-19, everybody wants to jump on a plane and travel somewhere. But really, we really need to reduce our international travel. So travel less often, or much less often. Something that I want to travel to, but I can't in all good conscience just hop on a plane and just fly somewhere whenever I feel like it. Learn to do things by hand, rediscover the joy of making something. Actually, I think that a lot of artisanal skills are already coming back. So it's something you can pick up maybe just at a hobbyist level for now, but at least you will have the skills. If there's no energy to do something, with electricity, then you have the skills to do something by hand. So, it's not that you can't use electricity, but at least you keep your options open and have a diverse set of skills. And then actually the most important thing is that we need to give our elected government the mandate to move away from pursuing GDP growth towards establishing an economic system that values what is truly valuable. Because no government in the world today dares to move away from GDP growth because they won't get elected. So actually the power lies in us to actually give our elected representatives the mandate to do that. Because if we keep complaining to them and we keep wanting to pursue our consumerist lifestyles, then of course governments will keep promising us GDP growth. You know, we are heading closer and closer to a time where it will be very, very difficult to transition without people getting violent. So really what we can do today is give the mandate to our elected representatives. The most important thing about finding the right answer is to ask the right questions. So we have to, like I said at the beginning of this talk, I hope that by the end of this, you'll have more questions than you have answers, because it's in asking the right questions that we are going to find the right answers. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Catherine, for your engaging presentation to our students. I must say that what you articulated is almost as if you saw what's going to happen 2 weeks from now. Looks like you have a future vision. In fact, 2 weeks from now, United Nations Environmental Program, they are going to convene in Nairobi. And I'm beginning to see the reports which are calling for setting limits to production, just as the world agreed to set the limits for carbon emissions. Several of your suggestions clearly point towards how do we go about setting the limits or lowering our production usage, eventually to better conditions for the humanity. So it's your deep insights and conviction which spoke through your slides and content. I'm sure these are engineering students from engineering school as well as design school. They may not have thought through topics from outside their disciplinary boundaries. So in a way, you have given them a holistic way of looking at what's going on and what is the best way to go forward. So I'd like to thank you from the National University of Singapore, as well as all the students that enrolled in this new module, ME 6509, Materials and Sustainability. We hope to have you back more regularly so that you can share further facts, information, because it's a highly dynamic field and has an interest of diverse stakeholders. I'd like to thank you on behalf of everyone. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Seeram. And I look forward to the Q&A when the students have watched the recording.
Yes, I will definitely arrange that one.